Hey there everyone, this is Mr. Olakaucos. So before I start this video, I'd just like to say that I hope you all are doing your best to remain safe and healthy. During the current circumstances we're living in, it's been very difficult for me to stay motivated to actually make good quality content. But I still want to keep my promise of posting at least one Yu-Gi-Oh video a month. Yet I still want to try and keep myself motivated to do so. So if you decided to listen to this opening disclaimer, then please leave a comment if you can, just to help motivate me further so I can continue making this kind of content for you. I really want to keep this Yu-Gi-Oh side of my channel going, and I would really appreciate if I got your motivational support. Again, thank you for taking the time to listen to this opening disclaimer, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. With that said, I hope you enjoy the Yu-Gi-Oh 101 database of Heraldic Beasts. Take care everyone. The Xyz summoning mechanic can be easily seen as a fan-favorite summoning technique. While it didn't have as much of an immediate impact as the Synchro Summon, Xyz was still able to leave a solid mark on the Yu-Gi-Oh metagame. So it's an absolute shame when we got Xyz decks that failed in almost every conceivable way in being an actual Xyz deck. And never was this more apparent than with Heraldic Beasts and their sub-archetype, Heraldry. They were a series of level and rank 4 monsters used by Tron, or Vectrix in the dub, of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal anime, who got a solid reputation of owning one of the most broken, and memeable, boss monsters ever shown in the anime. They were meant to be used as a typical Xyz deck with an additional side of Xyz stun, but unfortunately that didn't translate well in the actual card game, and Heraldics just became another forgotten failure of an archetype. That was until one support card came along and single-handedly saved them from the failure that they were. They're still not fantastic, but they can at least hold their own. Kinda, sorta, to an extent. We'll talk about that later. Anyway, in this episode of the Yu-Gi-Oh 101 database, I'll be looking at what made Heraldic such a miserable archetype upon arrival, and how they've suddenly jumped ship into a more playable deck. Let's start things off with their card lineup. To start things off, let's take a look at Heraldic Beast Aberconway. It's a level 4 wind dragon with 1800 attack and 900 defense, and has the following effect. If this card is in your graveyard, you can banish another Heraldic Beast Aberconway from your graveyard to target one Heraldic Beast monster in your graveyard, add that target to your hand. You can only use this effect of Heraldic Beast Aberconway once per turn. This is one of the better monsters the archetype has to offer, as the deck has many ways of doing stuff involving the graveyard, though the downside to this card is that you always have to max out on this thing just to get the full use of it. And even then, you need at least 2 Aberconway engraved just to activate its effect. This is not a great restriction by any means, but since it's one of the better cards in the archetype, you'll have to run 3. Now, if any of you have seen Rank 10 Yu-Gi-Oh's video of the 10 worst archetype support cards, then you might be able to remember this next card. If not, well, allow me to give a not so warm welcome to Heraldic Beast Burner's Falcon, a wind-winged beast with 1000 attack and 1600 defense, and when this card is summoned, you can make all face-up level 5 or higher monsters you control become level 4. I'm sorry, what did this do in the anime again? Okay, let's see here. Oh yeah, it turns all of your Xyz monsters into level 4 monsters. This is a perfect example of a card that was transitioned poorly into the actual card game, since every Heraldic Beast monster are level 4 monsters, thus making this card completely and totally useless. If you want to play a level modeling card, then just ditch this deck and play Gagagas. But if you still want to play this card, then I highly advise reconsidering your life choices. Heraldic Beast Yale, yes that's how it's pronounced, is an earth beast with 1000 attack and 1800 defense, and if you control 2 or more Heraldic Beast monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. This would be a potential one-off if the deck actually had a good way to easily swarm the field, but sadly there was no easy way to do so at the time, and even with the newer support it's still not worth running this. Plus, a few years later, we would end up getting another level 4 monster called Performer's Hat Tricker, which could special summon itself as long as there's at least 2 monsters on the field. Because of this, Yale is just not worth running, even in pure builds. The next monster is Heraldic Beast Basilisk, another earth beast, this time with 1000 attack and 1400 defense in this effect. After damage calculation, destroy any opponent's monster that battles this card. You see what I mean about this deck not having easy ways of swarming on their own? All their effects are either wasted on crappy on-field stuff, or are dedicated to their graveyard effects instead of actually trying to swarm the field with multiple heraldics. It forces you to use outside support cards like Kage de Kage or the previously mentioned Hat Tricker, just to help with getting enough resources on board, whilst also just using a few select heraldics as an engine more than anything. Basilisk is just bad by every means and is clearly outclassed by other monsters that deal with the opponent's monsters, like Healer of Millions, or even at the time, Ally of Justice Catasta. Destroy all copies that you may find of this card lurking in your tins or binders. Finally taking a break from the bad support, we get Heraldic Beast Twin-Headed Eagle, a wind-winged beast with 1200 attack and 1400 defense. You can banish this card from your graveyard to target one face-up Xyz monster you control with no materials, and 2 Heraldic Beast monsters in your graveyard. Attach those monsters from the graveyard to that face-up Xyz monster as materials. You can only use the effect of Heraldic Beast Twin-Headed Eagle once per turn. This is one of the primary reasons why I would now consider Heraldics to be an engine of sorts. Having a monster that helps replenish an Xyz monster's materials is very splendid, as the only other cards that could help facilitate at the time was... Overlay Regen. Due to the general nature of Heraldics needing to Xyz summon to basically play the game, you'll more than likely find yourself draining said monster's materials quickly, so you'll need a way to get them back should you happen to be unable to do so by other means. Twin-Headed Eagle easily holds up as one of the better monsters the Archetype has to offer, often seeing play in more pure builds, though not as much in a certain other build that I'll discuss later on. Heraldic Beast Unicorn is a light beast-type monster with 1100 attack and 1600 defense in this effect. You can banish this card from your graveyard to target one Psychic-type Xyz monster in your graveyard, special summon it, but its effects are negated. You can only use the effect of Heraldic Beast Unicorn once per turn. This is a card where, at the time, was almost useless due to the deck not having nearly enough targets to bring back. However, with the introduction of... them, Unicorn's worth has significantly increased. Yes, those monsters will have their effects negated, but it still helps with either dishing out a bit more damage, or even additional setup for potential disruption. For these reasons, it's often worth using a copy or two of Unicorn to help with comeback ability and OTKing. Their last main deck monster of the first line of support is Heraldic Beast Leo, an earth beast with 2000 attack and 1000 defense, and during the end phase of the turn this card was normal summoned, destroy this card. When this card is sent to the graveyard, add one Heraldic Beast monster from your deck to your hand, except another copy of itself. You can only use this effect of Heraldic Beast Leo once per turn. If anything, you'll be running this card for its second effect alone. Though with that said, only getting a search once it hits the graveyard can often be bothersome. Furthermore, the search effect isn't optional, so once it hits the graveyard, you must commit to the search, whether you still have the best search targets or not. And since it pops itself at the end of a turn of it being normal summoned, it makes using this card a lot more finicky than needed. But since it's your main searcher, you'll need to play 3. Since it's a Zexal era deck, Heraldics of course needed their own Xyz monsters, but sadly for the most part they're really not that great. The first of which is number 8, Heraldic King Genome Heritage, a rank 4 light psychic Xyz with 2400 attack and 1800 defense, requires specifically 2 level 4 Heraldic Beast monsters to summon, and has this effect. Once per turn, you can target one face-up Xyz monster your opponent controls. This card's name and original attack become that monster's name and current attack, and this card's effect becomes that monster's original effect, then that monster's attack becomes 0 and its effects are negated. These changes last until the end phase. Good idea in theory, but just poorly executed. For starters, this thing can only be summoned using Heraldic Beast monsters as materials, and since the deck has no easy ways of doing that outside of their spell and trap support, there would be no way you could summon this consistently. If that wasn't already insulting enough, its effect of copying an opponent's monster's name and effects only works on an Xyz monster, meaning that against a non-Xyz deck, this card would be completely useless. See also Mech Lords and their Synchro Absorbing effect. Maybe if this effect would also work as a quick effect, then maybe it would see play in a more pure build of Heraldics, but as things stand, it's just not worth running. Their quote-unquote boss monster, if you could call it that, is number 69.
Hilarious and original! Hilarious and original! Hilarious and original! Hilarious and original!
Heraldry Crest, another rank 4 light psychic Xyz. It has 2600 attack and 2100 defense, requires any 3 level 4 monsters to summon, and when this card is special summoned, negate the effects of all other face-up Xyz monsters currently on the field. You can target one other face-up Xyz monster on the field. Until the end phase, this card's name and original effect become the same as that monster. You can only use this effect of number 69 Heraldry Crest once per turn. The only good use this card ever saw was being used in a convoluted Fire Fist FTK, utilizing this card alongside number 75 Bamboozling Gossip Shadow in order to achieve the alternate win condition of Ghostrick Angel of Mischief, whereby having 10 materials attached to her would net you an automatic victory. Hashtag Rongominade wasn't the problem. Hashtag blame Gossip Shadow for everything. Hashtag give us the Numeron gates already, can I? Okay, so I wrote that joke ages ago as part of the scripting process, but on the very same day that I finally got motivated to record myself, it turned out that we're finally getting the Numeron Gate cards within the near future, and I cannot wait to see what total degeneracy this deck will have in store for the IRL card game. So, once again, this joke is aged poorly, so disregard it entirely. Now back to our regularly scheduled Archetype Archive ripoff. This card is also a perfect example of how not to transition a card from the anime into the actual card game. As a quick comparison, the anime version of Heraldry Crest is the one-sided skill drain that also steals the opponent's monster's effects, it couldn't be destroyed by card effects, and should the opponent even think about attacking, you could detach a material to destroy that monster. Oh, and since it's a number, it also had Numbers clause of being immune to battle destruction, except with other numbers, because Zexal. To be fair, to accurately transition this card properly would be basically impossible without it receiving a nerf of some kind. If it were done better maybe, then this card would actually see legit use of being a solid stun card. But sadly, reality is a cruel thing. A cruel, FTK-riddled thing. And that's all this card will ever be used for until Konami finally gets off their ears and bans Gossip Shadow. To keep interest in some of these number monsters alive, every other number or two would receive an upgraded Chaos number form because it's anime! And thus we got number C69.
Hilarious and original!
Heraldry Crest of Horror. It's a rank 5 light psychic Xyz with 4000 attack and 1800 defense, requires 4 level 5 monsters to summon, or you could just use a rank up magic, it's not that difficult, and has the following effect. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can destroy all cards your opponent controls. If this card is number 69 Heraldry Crest as material, it gains this effect. Once per turn, you can detach an Xyz material from this card, then target one face-up Xyz monster your opponent controls. This card gains attack equal to that face-up monster's original attack, and if it gains attack this way, this card's name becomes that monster's, and it gains that monster's original effect. These effects last until the end phase. A 4K beater with the ability to nuke the opponent's board if they even dare to think about attacking is a pretty funny idea and concept, but the downside is that to get the full use of this card is that you have to run the original Heraldry Crest alongside a specific spell to bring this card out. And let's be honest, unless you're playing Raid Raptors, then there's no way you'll be able to bring this card out consistently. And while you could also bring Horror Crest out on your opponent's turn with Resurgam Xyz, do bear in mind that said monster will just return to the extra deck unless you discarded a rank up magic, which, once again, is not exactly optimal unless you're playing a degenerate Euterbic Zexal Turbo build. Due to some newer Psychic Xyz monsters we got over the last year, it's now easier to bring this card out, though it's not exactly recommended. Their spell and trap support starts off with advanced heraldry art, and unlike a similarly named ritual spell, this is a normal spell that reads, target 2 Heraldic Beast monsters in your graveyard, special summon both of those targets. Immediately after this effect resolves, Xyz summon 1 Xyz monster using those 2 monsters only. For how easy it is to flood the graveyard with Heraldics, due to most of them being either useless or having amazing floating effects, accomplishing this card's conditions can often be stupid easy. It's literally a 1-card Xyz in the form of a spell, which would be unheard of until the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Contracted cancer in the form of the Zodiac archetype. Overall, heraldry art is excellent for helping make a comeback, or for ending a combo with a good rank 4 disruptor, depending on the matchup. Always run 3. Heraldry Reborn is their next normal spell with this effect. Target 1 Heraldic Beast monster in your graveyard, special summon it. What you see is what you get. An archetypal monster reborn, and not even a hard once per turn at that. Then again, the main deck monster lineup was pretty bad and very lacking, and since this was early Zexal, not having a hard once per turn was to be expected. You'll often max out on this no matter what build you're playing, but running a minimum of 2 also wouldn't hurt if push comes to shove. Their only trap card, at least for the time being, is Heraldry Change. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, special summon one Heraldic Beast monster from your hand, then end the battle phase. This was okay for the time being, since the deck had so few ways of swarming on their own, but nowadays it's just not worth running outside of pure builds due to battle traps not being as relevant, unless you're a control deck. It can keep you safe from taking hefty damage at a pinch, but with other more powerful variants of Heraldic Beasts being available, it's not really the best card to use. If playing pure, run only by preference and don't try to max out on it. And before all 4 of you Heraldic players watching this start typing away in the comments, yes, they do technically have another trap in the form of Heraldry Record, but no, I will not talk about it, since even though it has Heraldry in the name, and thus searchable with their archetypal field spell which we'll discuss later, it does literally nothing for Heraldics, and is instead rather anti-support more than anything else. Heraldic Beasts would get their next line of support in the main set Legacy of the Valiant, but only in the OCG in November 2013. The TCG wouldn't see this new support and plenty of other missing cards until the TCG exclusive set World Superstars a year and a half later in April 2015 because of the freaking pandemic, am I right? And by that time, all the decks with that missing support were already as good as dead, but better late than never, I suppose. Their first missing line of support starts with Heraldic Beast Amphisbina, a level 4 wind dragon with 1700 attack and 1100 defense, and this effect. You can discard one other Heraldic Beast monster, special summon this card from your hand. Once per turn, you can discard one Heraldic Beast monster, this card gains 800 attack until the end of this turn. The cost of discarding another Heraldic Beast to summon this guy is more often inconsequential due to all the other good Heraldics having effects in the graveyard. Besides, monsters that could easily special summon themselves, that aren't named Yale, was something the deck desperately needed, and should push come to shove, the attack boosting effect could also help with setting up the graveyard, even though many people don't even bother. In either case, always run 3. Their next monster came in the form of another Xyz. Number 18, Heraldry Patriarch, is a rank 4 light psychic with 2200 attack and defense, requires any 2 level 4 monsters to summon, and has this effect. Once per chain during either player's turn, if 2 or more monsters with the same name are on the field, you can detach one Xyz material from this card, choose one monster among those with the same name, and destroy all other monsters with that name. While this card remains face up on the field, your opponent cannot summon monsters with the same name as any of the monsters chosen for this card's effect. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can send 2 Heraldic Beast monsters from your deck to the graveyard. Let's be honest, the only reason you'll be playing this card is for its second effect. Being able to dump any 2 Heraldic Beasts upon hitting the graveyard is nothing short of incredible due to how much setup you can get from their floating effects. Because of this, many early Heraldic builds would include Gale Dogra, if only to dump this card into the grave to net you further advantage. Nowadays though, it's often better to run Extra Foolish Burial instead, since you won't run the risk of ending with a 700 attack point monster as part of your field. But honestly, you're probably better off running the literal 1 card FTK, if only to watch your opponents auto-scoop at the mere sight of this thing. Hashtag ban Gale Dogra. But anyway, back to Patriarch. Its first effect had the right idea in mind, but wasn't well executed, since even though your opponent could no longer summon monsters with the same name as the chosen monster, they could still use said monster on field to attack or use its effects. Again, you're only using this card for its second effect, and because of that, running 1 or 2 copies is often perfectly acceptable. The last missing line of support came in the form of the field spell Augmented Heraldry. Psychic type Xyz monsters on the field cannot be targeted by spell or trap effects. Once per turn, you can discard 1 Heraldic Beast monster, add 1 Heraldry spell or trap from your deck to your hand, except Augmented Heraldry. You cannot normal or special summon monsters during the turn you activate this effect, except Psychic type Xyz monsters and Heraldic Beast monsters, even if this card leaves the field. Oh my gosh, there were so many things wrong with this card that if I started a full-blown rant, this would probably end up being an hour-long video. But to break things down for the sake of time, its protection effects, which by the way is only limited to Psychic Xyz monsters, is absolute garbage since it only protects them from being targeted by spells and traps specifically, and not cards effects in general. Plus, if you pay the cost of discarding a Heraldic Beast, which is already another can of worms on its own, to search any other heraldry card, it locks you out of summoning everything that isn't a Heraldic Beast or a Psychic Xyz, which is far too many monsters to give up summoning considering the incredible variety of the rank 4 toolbox. In case you couldn't tell already, I'm not a huge fan of this card, and I do not advise maxing out in this card whatsoever, even in pure builds, should you still decide to play this. After the missing support arrived, Heraldics were then left to die alongside every other bad Zexal archetype. Even though there will be a spicy Guard Dragon build many years later due to Aberconway and Amphisbaner both being dragons, the banning of Agapane would seal the deck's fate of trying to be relevant ever again. That was until someone at Konami remembered that the Arclight family was a thing, and so in Ignition Assault they gave each family member a new support card. Trey got a single new Chronomaly monster, Quattro got a new Gimmick Puppet spell to go along with his new support from Legendary Duelist Immortal Destiny, Quentin got a new level 9 machine to go along with his Dyson Sphere Turbo strategy.
But why though?
And Vetrix wound up getting Charged Up Heraldry, a normal spell with this effect. Tribute 1 monster, special summon 2 Heraldic Beast monsters from your deck in defense position, also you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of this turn after this card resolves, except Psychic or Machine monsters. You can only activate 1 Charged Up Heraldry per turn. This card right here, the one that you see on screen, this is how you single-handedly save an entire archetype from the jaws of failure. A simple tribute of any monster nets you any 2 Heraldics straight from the deck, and considering that all the best monsters that they have solid floating effects, this makes for excellent recursion and additional advantage. Its extra deck restricting effects are also pretty inconsequential due to a certain other rank 4 based archetype. You see, a year prior in Savage Strike, we were introduced to the world premiere archetype of Time Thieves, a Psychic type deck of level and rank 4 monsters, and in the same set as Charged Up Heraldry, there would also be new Time Thief support to help them even further. And just like that, the Heraldic Time Thief deck was born, bringing with it a powerful combo that uses only 3 cards: Time Thief Regulator, Charged Up Heraldry, and Advanced Heraldry Art. The combo is as follows. Normal Summon Regulator. Activate its effect to tribute itself to special summon Time Thief's Winder and Bezel Ship from the deck. Then activate Winder's effect to search Time Thief Retrograde from the deck. Tribute Winder to activate Charged Up Heraldry, summoning Heraldic Beasts Leo and Unicorn from the deck. Then overlay them both to summon Time Thief Redoer, and activate his effect to banish himself until the end phase by detaching a monster. Then, since Leo hit the graveyard, you immediately get your search of another Heraldic monster, for example Amphisbaner. Activate Advanced Heraldry Art to bring back your Leo and Unicorn to overlay them both into Time Thief Perpetua, set Retrograde and pass turn, letting Redoer return to the field on the end phase. Then, during your opponent's standby phase, activate Perpetua's effect to detach Leo to bring back Winder. Leo's effect will trigger to get you another Heraldic search, while Winder will also trigger on summon to get you another Time Thief search. Lastly, during that same standby phase, activate Redoer's effect to attach the top card of the opponent's deck to himself, while chaining Perpetua's effect to attach the trap card Time Thief Flyback to Redoer from your deck. Let's just size this all up real quick. You have a set Retrograde that negates spells and traps and attaches it to your Time Thief Xyz's material. You have a Redoer that can spin an opponent's card to the top of their deck by detaching a trap card, while that same trap card, Time Thief Flyback, can banish itself from grave to attach a card from the opponent's grave to your Time Thief Xyz as a quick effect. You have a Bezel Ship on field that can do the same thing as Flyback by tributing itself as a quick effect. You still have a Winder and a Perpetua on field, and you now have regained your 3-card resources in your hand. From a simple 3-card combo, you have now gone +5 while also having at least 1 negation and 2 to 3 disruptions by your opponent's standby phase. And all this was possible due to the timing of Charged Up Heraldry's release to coincide with the new Time Thief support. If you haven't caught on already, Charged Up Heraldry is absolutely fantastic. It's something the deck was literally dying to get, and is something that you should never run any less than 3 of, no matter what build you're playing. That currently puts an end to the Heraldic Beast support, so now we can take a look at their strengths, or lack thereof, and weaknesses. Probably the best thing about this deck is in the form of their spell cards. Aside from the field spell, they're all incredibly powerful for such a small archetype. And considering that they have a 1-card Xyz in the form of a spell, and multiple ways of revival, Heraldics have a pretty solid comeback ability. Plus, all of their best main deck monsters have pretty solid graveyard effects to boot. Aberconway can further help with comeback ability, Leo provides additional consistency, Unicorn revives your fallen Xyz monsters for either defense or even OTK potential, and Twin-Headed Eagle replenishes your Xyz monsters' materials should they happen to run out. And of course, they're level 4 based, so the rank 4 toolbox is more than open to experimentation. Unfortunately, they have far too many issues to take into account, even more so than what they're good for. For starters, before charged up heraldry was a thing, the deck had no real way of swarming the field by themselves, and long before Time Thieves even entered the picture, almost all of the psychic Xyz they could go into were just awful. For an Xyz deck, their only good matchup of being against Xyz based decks was still far from Heraldic's favour, simply due to how bad their Xyz monsters are, and how much effort it takes into bringing them out without any easy way of cheating around it with their best spells. Because of this, it's definitely not worth playing Genome Heritage or Heraldry Crest, due to them only being good against Xyz decks. Pure variants of Heraldics are forced to play generic level 4 monsters that can easily special summon themselves, just to help them get to said Xyz monsters, since charged up heraldry can only get you so far. On the other hand, hybrid variants will more often than not feel more like you're playing the other part of the hybrid build more than actual Heraldics, see also Time Thieves. Since the best Heraldic Beast monsters float, and the fact that they have great recovery cards involving the graveyard, locking out their graveyard will shut the deck down almost indefinitely. Unless they can get to a rank 4 that can get rid of the card causing the problems, it's literally game over for them, since their main deck monsters are all incredibly weak in terms of attack strength. Lastly and most importantly, their spell cards are what helps the deck function to an extent. So if the opponent is able to prevent you from getting access to them, there's almost no hope for Heraldics to fight back. Outside of Amphisbaner and other generic level 4 monsters that can special summon themselves, it'll be almost impossible for them to get out an Xyz to fight back. Now for a few tips in case anyone were to build Heraldic Beasts. Just play the Time Thief build, it's clearly the best option. Both of these archetypes have natural synergy with each other due to all the Time Thief monsters being Psychic type, which more than compensates for charged up heraldry's restrictions concerning the extra deck, as well as most of the restrictions involving augmented heraldry, should you choose to play it. Heraldic Beasts Leo, Amphisbaner and Aberconway will always be the monsters you'll be maxing out on, while use of Unicorn and Twin-Headed Eagle mostly boils down to personal preference, running no more than 2 of each. But if you do decide to run them both, then only playing 1 of each copy would probably be ideal. With the deck being level and rank 4 based, that gives you plenty of options concerning the rank 4 toolbox. Tornado Dragon for back row removal, Abyss Dweller for locking out the graveyard, Evil Swarm Exoton Knight for that spicy board wipe, and of course, the Utopia Brigade for the OTK comeback. It's also worth suggesting Gaga Gaga Magician for further comeback ability, alongside Utopic Future with Utopic Future Dragoon for additional protection and even disruption. One can also run 2 copies of Heraldry Patriarch in order to bring out number 100 Numeron Dragon for another surprise OTK, but not as recommended due to extra deck space being so difficult to sort out already. Besides, for a better OTK method that not only fills up just 1 extra deck slot, but is also another solid comeback card, Infinitrack Fortress Megaclops is the perfect tool for the job. A Link 3 machine with 4000 attack that's immune and indestructible to most monsters, and has the ability to revive one of your Xyz by also turning an opponent's card into that revived monster's Xyz material in the process. Yes, they'll end up taking half damage for the rest of the turn, and yes, you'll have to use 3 Xyz monsters to summon it, but seeing that this is an Xyz based deck, and that it has plenty of ways to revive their monsters and go into further Xyz plays, you should have absolutely no trouble with bringing this thing out within a couple of turns. And lastly, most of the Time Thief cards from Savage Strike and Ignition Assault will all be staples in every sense of the word, though Hack and Chronocorder will both be optional. Heraldic Beasts had the right idea in mind of wanting to be a legitimate Xyz stun deck, but simply couldn't live up to expectations. Almost every monster they had was straight up awful, and that was also extremely apparent where the extra deck was concerned. And aside from their spells and traps, they had no real way of succeeding on their own without the aid of outside and generic level 4 support. While they did have a bit of a happy ending thanks to charged up heraldry, they had to wait for far too long to even get one, and that was only made even more bittersweet due to Time Thieves being the archetype to help them get them back on track, when we already know that Time Thieves are proving to be a popular competitive deck, especially with Lunar Lights before the banning of Tiger. But I guess we can look at it this way. If Time Thieves were never made, then there'd be nothing to help make Heraldics become a bit more viable than they already were. And if the deck wasn't even table 500 worthy before, then I guess they probably are now. Hey everyone, I'd like to thank you all for watching. If you made it this far, then please consider giving this video a like and potentially even subscribing. Or you could also follow me on Twitter using the link found in the description. Up next will be the Yu-Gi-Oh! 101 database on the Winged Dragon of Ra, where hopefully by the time I'm done, the new support from Duelist Pack Duelist of Gloom will all be revealed. Until next time, this is Mr. Orichalcos, signing out.